Alright, Luke Smith has finally spoken, and it is a long one. I'm essentially just going to read this out to you guys from Luke's perspective. Hey everyone, I wanted to try a little experiment with our communication and put together a longer look at where Destiny has been over the last few months and where it's heading next. I think it's important to take the time to reflect on what's happening so we can show you where we're going. I'm calling this the director's cut. Based on how long this ended up being, a key learning from this is maybe there's a better way to communicate this than a giant wall of text. Let me know. I also may like doing it in a different format in the future. I'll let you know. Today I'm going to talk about more than just the Destiny game and talk some about how we build Destiny and the effects it can have on the team. I think transparency about the game is important, and I also want to be transparent about the work required. Sound okay? That's rhetorical, because a wall of text is coming up. We're making a lot of changes to Destiny 2 and Shadowkeep and New Light. We want Destiny 2 to be an amazing action MMO in a single evolving world that you can play anytime, anywhere with your friends. I'm going to keep referencing that all the time until it's true, and then I'm going to keep referencing it until it's good enough. Now first up, the 10 dots on the last 6 months looking back. Overall, there are some things about annual passes that work out very well and some real learnings for us along the way. The annual pass was a big transition for us. We've been moving away from the DLC and trying to provide more ongoing reasons to play Destiny. I wanted to start the State of the Game series by looking back at how we got here. I'm going to largely focus on Season of the Drifter to near present day. We set up a calendar of content, showed you the plan early, and delivered it. A lot of you love Destiny for the chase on the way to improving your characters. Between the annual pass drops, quest lines, and events in between, the team did a great job of providing stuff to do, items to chase, growing fat from strength, etc. Destiny history has had many content droughts, but not this year. But the annual pass was harder on the team than we anticipated. The scope of what we delivered, pace that we delivered it, and the overall throughput for annual pass takes a toll on Bungie team. I and many others had conversations throughout the year with team members who had jumped from release to release about the grind of working on Destiny. Working on the game was starting to wear people down. Here's an example. During the annual pass, we invented new, bespoke ways to earn rewards each season. Black Armory had its bounties, Season of the Drifter had Reckoning Machine, Season of Opulence had its Chalice. Each of these mechanics, each with their own lessons, were valuable, but also put the team into an unsustainable development cycle. We need to develop a more systematic, standardized set of mechanics for progression to keep our teams healthier. We're going to take this problem on in D2 Year 3. We have a powerful sources problem. As the game's weekly source of power grew and Destiny grew with it, this at times could really feel like a chore. Each season brought with it new powerful sources, and optimizing your character meant that you were maybe still running 3 story missions every week or returning to the Dreaming City months after those new few magical trips from the last fall. I feel like we needed to do a better job of shifting powerful sources. We could explore things like changing the value of powerful sources to create new seasonal efficiencies, or retire some powerful sources as we bring new sources into the game. Simply put, I wish we'd been able to do more seasonal curation of the game. Okay, I can agree with that, and then also back to the point of 10 dots of the last 6 months in terms of it being hard on the team at Bungie. That conversation is really reminding me of the same article we read many years ago before the launch of Halo 2. The Bungie team got really burnt out, and essentially that is kind of like what led to Bungie separating from Halo. So the grind to Halo 1, then the crazy grind to get Halo 2 out, Halo 3 out, and then by Reach, Bungie was pretty much just ready to get out. And we're not even including Halo Wars, ODST, all those other things. So we definitely don't want them to burn out, but I gotta say, I really enjoyed the amount of content we got this past year. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of stuff to do, even from like a week-to-week basis. Now, moving on to Season of the Drifter Thoughts Part 1. Luke states here that I like Gambit Prime. It felt like a great refinement of Gambit to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Matches end quicker, so it felt more efficient. The evading frequency feels lower, so I can collect and dunk. I think there's something cool about the roles. Although the requirements to get a full set online to inhabit a role meant not enough folks got to appreciate the playstyle diversity. In the future, we're going to have to make a choice. Which Gambit is the Highlander of Gambits, Prime or Classic? This isn't just about removing stuff from Destiny 2, but the game cannot grow infinitely forever. It's about focusing refinements and evolutions to the Gambit ecosystem. We think Gambit is sweet and deserves more ongoing support, and we want to ultimately focus that support on whichever mode ends up being the Highlander. There can only be one. I love it, man. That said, we hear hear you that not everyone is excited about the season that overly focuses on one part of the game. Destiny is a game with a lot of breadth, and we agree that this season felt too specialized. Yeah, it was a tad bit too specialized, but it was also a weird time for me. Like, I probably would have been more involved with Gambit and Gambit Prime in general, but I was also in the process of swapping different accounts, moving to different platforms. So I had this huge amount of grind to do before ever participating in Season of the Drifter. I think for many of us, when it came to Season of the Drifter and Gambit Prime, I think what lost a lot of people was they've already experienced Gambit for many, many months. So I felt like that honeymoon phase had already moved on. Now, between Gambit and Gambit Prime, I do prefer Gambit Prime. It's got a lot more depth to it. The armor sets are a little annoying to get because you got to go through Reckoning and other things, but it is a more refined and better experience in comparison to Gambit. I enjoy Gambit, but Gambit Prime is the better choice, and I would prefer it to remain over regular Gambit. Now, moving on to the Season of the Drifter thoughts, part 2, aka let's talk about the Reckoning. Now, in parentheses, he says, in encounter design, the first time I used Phoenix Protocol at home, I knew it was over. It was an exotic coat that refills my Well of Radiance and then refills itself as I slay, so that I can continue to place my Well of Stand here to be borderline invulnerable and deal tons of damage. Dado has a great video that talks about Well of Radiance's effect on the PvE game. I wonder, how are we going to make content that fairly challenges players again? With Reckoning and Season of the Drifter, we got a taste of what kind of content we need to build to challenge. Protocol wearing warlocks, match-made encounters that accost you from all directions, plant snipers off in the distance, and put players in between a pincher attack of many whelps. Handle it. I want to link a thing here, but it's definitely not T for teen. And giant bosses, also FU Night Taking Guy. This is what it had to be. We were breaking encounter rules left, right, center on the Reckoning Bridge, in no small part due to players in always active Wells of Radiance becoming invulnerable gods holding all 6 Infinity Stones all the time. In Reckoning, we set out to build an activity that could be relatively easy at tier 1 and scale it to a very challenging at tier 3. We have an internal team here codenamed Velveeta. They were formed in the wake of the Crota's End modern unplugging debacle to help find the cheesiest things to do, use in the challenge and PvE portions of the game. These players are some of our craftiest. Once Velveeta can get close to beating something or beat it outright, that becomes an important data point on our is this hard enough evaluation. We give them a bunch of tips like, here's how this works, can you beat it? So if they can, it's a good indicator of the action game and gear game working together. Let's talk about encounter design. Generally, in activities, we expect players to complete alone. Dungeons, raid, 0-hour type activities can play by a different set of properties or in a match-made groups. There are a number of guidelines we use when we build them. We don't want to spawn enemies behind the player. We want players to play a game of taking space from enemies. We want players to have cover where their shields and health can recharge, or where they get to be smart using geometry, movement, ability, gunplay to dig enemies out of cover, and making interesting decisions about target prioritization. We want players to be able to understand where in the space enemies will come from. And if we're going to reverse the combat front on players, aka spawn enemies behind them, we want to telegraph that. We use drop ships, spawn clouds, audio cues, all kinds of tricks to try and prepare players for reinforcements. As character power was dramatically increasing, more on reasons for this increase later on, the encounter rules got thrown out the window. To summarize this, Destiny had sweet gear, and in order to create challenge in the Reckoning, we broke a bunch of our encounter design philosophy. That sweet gear, coupled with the encounter design, meant the number of ways to viably, efficiently progress was dramatically reduced. We want Destiny to be a game where you have lots of choices with your character. Build what you choose to do, and funneling those choices down to only one in the Reckoning is something we don't want to repeat. There's more about damage and player power sprinkled in this update, and even more on the rest. Last note. I think it's totally sweet when an activity challenges you to use something other than your favorite item. I don't think the whole game should work that way, but when it comes to bust some shields on the Shanks in 0 hour, I had a use for the distant relation scout rifle in my vault. I didn't really mind the things that were broken in Reckoning, and if anything, to scale with players' abilities, as well as a number of different exotics and powerful weapons and gear in this game, encounters are gonna have to be rethought. There won't be the same cookie cutter, here's your encounter, here's entry point for enemies, and here's where you hold your ground. This is an issue with a lot of PvE games, and that formula is honestly something that has to be rethought pretty much constantly. Now, what we don't want is for Bungie to go backwards. We don't want our gear and everything we have on our Guardians to fall in line with dealing with vanilla mechanics or vanilla encounters. Now, moving on, Season of the Drifter Thoughts Part 3, aka now let's talk about difficulty and a touch on Sandbox nerfs. Oh boy, I started to talk about challenge, difficulty, above, and drifted. To encounter difficulty, but it's all related. When the media would come play our Halo games for an event, we'd always recommend they play the game on Heroic. Heroic changed a bunch about Halo combat. It made enemy weapons more accurate, but not too accurate. Enemies would fire more frequently, which made you feel like a hero when you dodged them. It increased projectile speed, and Heroic lowered player outgoing damage so that the enemies would survive longer and make their way further through their behavior tree and therefore appear more intelligent. There's more than just the above going on, but that's a quick summary of some of the changes. Dude, that's the truth, dude. Playing Halo on Legendary? Oh! But here's why. We asked the media to play the games on Heroic because when the game is challenging, overcoming the challenge feels incredible. Important to note here, challenge isn't something universal. In an action game, challenge can be largely personal. One person's challenging might be easy to someone else. We've historically thought about the main Destiny campaigns as something we want to be pretty easy. I think D2's campaign was actually too easy at times. And as players push further into the post-game, they be able to find more challenge. Across Destiny's history, we haven't had enough challenge deep into the endgame, and that's definitely something on our list as we head toward fall of 2019. Overcoming challenges is a huge part of what makes an action game moment-to-moment engaging. Action games are a delicate balance of growing stronger, the game rising up to push back, introducing new challenges that forces you to learn, become more powerful, master at a new element, and at their best, creating the fist-pumping moment of celebration when you achieve victory. Holy hell, I'm getting like Dark Souls vibes right now reading this. But Destiny has an RPG component too, and the RPG component is about customization, optimization, and it's a way for players to choose how they overcome the challenge. The entire time we've been making Destiny, the action game and the RPG have been fighting. It's the forever war. The RPG has the power to dramatically overcome the action game, and the action game has the power to render the RPG game irrelevant. It's aligned by nature. Destiny will always have to straddle. That's so true though. What can be challenging for many can be easily overcome by a loadout. I mean, when you look at something like Skyrim, going into that cave for the very first time, you gotta sneak your way through. But then lo and behold, once you get your level up and you get your build right, hell, you could just shield bash your way through, never stop to sneak, and literally run non-stop from one end of the cave to the other. That's the trademark of an RPG game though, is you progressively become better through things that you acquire, your loadout, thus making the game much easier. But like Dark Souls here, the action RPG combo is something that is constantly having to be straddled, and Destiny is also in the same situation. In order to create challenge during Season of the Drifter, we needed to break a bunch of encounter rules. Have exotics like Phoenix Protocol basically functioning like a key, or hope you match with multiple Radiance Warlocks, which then unlocks success in the match-made encounters of Reckoning. There's a really good video from Slayerage on this context of the nerfs we made heading into Season of Opulence. Those nerfs also saw Whisper of the Worm get its day in court. If I could turn back time, we'd probably not run Whisper as the original Black Hammer infinite ammo design. However, considering the year before had Destiny 2 feeling very restrictive and power limited, I think we did the best that we could with the knowledge and intuition we had last summer. Whisper was an outlier that lets you stand still at a safe distance in a pool that makes you borderline invulnerable, never having to reload or relocate for ammo, and allow players to deal piles and piles of damage on giant bosses who aren't threatening. This isn't your fault, it's ours. We're making some stuff too easy and allowing players to circumvent parts of the game, mechanics that circumvent the ammo game, relocate to pick up ammo bricks, or completely ignore the reload animations, a critical part of a weapon's tuning, are mechanics that create the kind of outliers that we ultimately have to tamp down before the game spirals into a boss health version of Reckoning Bridge. The other significant set of changes we have made to the game during this time were taking down the Super Snowball exotics. With as powerful as Destiny's supers have become, they are on the whole dramatically more powerful than Destiny 1 supers. Using your super to recover your super is an amplification to player power that the challenge and difficulty game can't keep up with. But we're going to talk about supers much later on. Difficulty and challenge are important parts of mastery. There are more changes coming in Shadowkeep, buffed to things like scout rifles, nerfed to mechanics that circumvent the ammo economy, and refactoring the way damage stack rules work. We're going to talk about it in the next episode. Now, moving on to Season of Opulence Part 1, the Pursuits tray is a caterpillar, and a cocoon. Quest log is the beautiful butterfly. I've seen streams and videos of people beating activities in Destiny blindfolded. I cannot imagine developing the muscle memory and memorization, never mind the thumb skill required to be good at Destiny with the blast shield down. When things fundamentally change in a way that interrupts muscle memory and mastery, it is frustrating. The initial set of changes to the Pursuits tray earlier this year did a few things beyond upsetting muscle memory. It certainly didn't get as far as the team wanted it in its initial release, and it also didn't feel like an improvement over what previously existed. It felt like we started to redecorate your house, but we didn't finish it, and sometimes that's how things in a live game can feel. The morning after the Pursuits changes went live, I talked to some folks on the UI team about the feature. They had Reddit open. Haven't you heard, Luke? Nah, I haven't. Please don't. They were crestfallen. Not just because of somewhat harsh feeling feedback, but because the team wanted to make something sweet, exceed your expectations, and meet their own expectations. None of these things happened. We wanted to try something different with Pursuits, in the sense that we knew where we wanted this feature to end up, but we'd taken some iterative steps to get there. I think we got to do a better job ensuring that while we're remodeling your house, the potential of renovation is clear, either in the game or via some communication here on the site. We want a quest log with great tracking that can help players prioritize what to do next. Oh, and this fall, bounties will be separated from quests, and PC players can assign a hotkey that takes them directly to the Pursuits menu. Oh, that's nice. Look at this, guys. So you got your quest and Pursuits right there on the left, and your bounties completely separated. And for PC players, being able to set up a hotkey, this is really nice. I'm okay with this. I know a lot of people still want to revert back to the old system, but at this point, I don't know. I've gotten pretty used to it. Like, the first few weeks was rough, but now that we've pretty much memorized how it feels now, you might as well just make it a better system than what it is. And separating the bounties from quests, I'm all for that. Now, moving on to Season of Opulence Part 2, the Evolving Eververse. Last year, we thought long and hard about Eververse and how we wanted to change the strategy around microtransactions in Destiny. As some folks have smartly pointed out, MTX is a big part of business being a live game. I'm not going to say MTX funds the studio or pays for projects like Shadowkeep. It doesn't wholly fund either of those things, but it does help fund ongoing development of Destiny 2 and allows us to fund creative efforts we otherwise couldn't afford. For example, Whisper of the Worm's ornaments were successful enough that it paid, dev cost wise, for the 0-hour mission rewards to be constructed. This shit matters. The storefront, which we launch alongside Season of Opulence, in the first part of the strategic shift we're making with MTX. The decision to run old content in Bright Ingrams instead of making new Bright Ingrams is another part of the shift. We want to believe that our players would rather just buy things they like from the store. Earlier this summer, we detailed a bunch of changes coming to Bright Dust and Eververse this fall, and if you haven't read that, go check it out here. The storefront is going to get another round of enhancements this fall too. We're going to move it to the director so you don't have to go to the tower and see tests to interact with it. We're going to give it some class specific content. So if you're on your Titan looking for Titan universal ornaments with small shoulders, you'll see Titan armor on one of the store subpages. We're also going to make it so that the pieces you've already acquired from a given set reduce the silver price of the set. For instance, if you are a 3 out of 5 OPULENCE set on your Titan, the cost to finish the set in silver will be reduced by 60%. There are some other philosophies here that we haven't made explicitly clear. We have made deliberate choices related to cosmetic items and not having them come from gameplay. Gameplay rewards are where you get items, power, mods, perk combination stats, triumphs, and titles. The aesthetics for armor blurs the line some. We want players to get cool armor from activities and the role that filled thematic to where they were acquired. Cosmetic items like universal ornaments, weapon ornaments, shaders, ships, sparrows, emotes, and finishers typically come from the store. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, that's how we think about this. We're continuing to try to separate the capability gameplay from vanity, and Armor 2.0 and universal ornaments are a big part of this separation. This is also why finisher perks are mods that can be socketed into equipment so that their aesthetic can stand alone. As always, we welcome your feedback and thoughts. Chalice. All right, so this is one of those things, it is a thin line, okay? Now, Luke is right as far as what they are able to afford by having Eververse. Eververse is a big part of revenue for Bungie, but for most live games, it's a huge revenue source, which is why you still see microtransactions in so many games that are even not free to play. Now, me personally, I'm okay with the cosmetic items that are being offered through Eververse, and that's because most of the cosmetic items that I wear are not Eververse related. Now, there's people out there that see a set in Eververse and go, I gotta have that set. I need to look like that character right there. I like wearing armor and gear, even if it's ugly as sin. I like wearing gear that's related to an activity, whether it's a raid set or an old school trial set. So the look of my character doesn't necessarily bother me. Instead, I like to show off full sets of armor from those really hard activities. As far as Eververse and the way it is now, I wish we had more access to ornaments. Like Season of the Drifter, I want to be able to go in there and directly purchase ornaments from Eververse. A lot of my prime weapons I am just now getting, but unfortunately, I can't get those ornaments from Eververse. I would buy probably way more stuff if there was like a back page of like, I don't know, 40, 50 items of just all of the ornaments. And maybe you can have it refresh once a week, but that way I can go to there and see what I'm missing and pick up that ornament. Now, moving on, Season of Opulence Part 3. The Menagerie is sweet. Have you ever been to an amazing party for something like the Super Bowl? It's the kind of party where there is an incredible spread of snacks rolling out throughout the event, amazing comfortable seating, an AV system and a TV that makes you jealous, and super sweet people to hang out with. Once you've been to this party, the Super Bowl anywhere else never feels the same. Invite me back someday. Dude, there's some truth to that. I got box tickets one year at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium down in New Orleans with the Saints. Look, guys, I have a tough time going and watching just a regular Saints game. Don't get me wrong, I love it still. But once you sit one time in the box and you got free drinks coming at you, damn cheerleaders were stopping in, taking pictures with us, it's difficult. Now, I didn't afford that. That was like a gift from somebody, okay? So I will never see that part of the stadium ever again. But believe me, boys, if we ever make it big, that will be the first thing I buy. Now, Luke continues, this is how I feel about Escalation Protocol. Once I had the feeling of running around in public bubbles, fighting giant bosses with a bunch of players, even though getting into a good instance of Mars for Protocol was a pain in the butt, public gameplay never felt the same. At its peak, when you have a bunch of players slaying big old bosses, Escalation Protocol is one of the best things we've added to Destiny 2. The Menagerie, a 6-player match-made activity where you make progress no matter what, is awesome. It's learned by watching mechanics, means that it doesn't require communication between players. The way groups can make progress, even if they don't kill the boss, means the real efficiency gain is by learning and executing the fights quickly. Hasapico, am I saying that right? Beloved by Callus, and also beloved by me. Feels like a great translation of World of Warcraft's Heigen the Unclean into an action game. Now, Season of Opulence Part 4. The Chalice of Opulence, and somehow even more Season of the Drifter thoughts. Good lord. Having some ways to target and farm some specific gear in Destiny is great. We did a version of this with Black Armory weapons, but the very, very long character-specific attunement quest line for the Forges was a bit much. Yes, it was. We made the Opulence attunement account-wide as a result, which was amazing. The Chalice was an even bigger version of targeting rewards. Players could unlock different sets of armor, different weapons, and even select their Masterwork perk roll. Pause on the Chalice thoughts. We'll come back to the Chalice. Let's talk about how we build the game. Good lord, where are we going with this? While content for Destiny is released serially, it is largely developed in parallel. For instance, while Forsaken was in the final few months, Black Armory was well underway. The Season of the Drifter was in development while Black Armory was being built, etc. For years, people have wondered, why doesn't Release X do the same content drop Y did? Get it together, Bungie. This is one of the reasons why. So even though Menagerie is sweet and Chalice is great, while Shadowkeep was being built, the Menagerie and Chalice hadn't yet been released, so we didn't know how players would react. Because we have so much to build, we frequently find ourselves having to place many bets at the same time. This has paid dividends at times. We've discovered new and awesome things like Escalation Protocol or the Menagerie, and this has also resulted in things that feel like setbacks at other times. An example of a setback is the reward chase during Season of the Drifter. There are a bunch of super awesome weapons in Drifter, 1-2 punch, last man standing, but the path to them isn't clear like Black Armory or the Chalice. We didn't do a good enough job of rewarding players for the time or giving them clear paths to some of the sweet weapons in the release. If we had to do a do-over with season rewards, weapons, we'd probably have dropped armor directly from Prime and maybe used Reckoning combined with learnings from Menagerie's fail-forward mechanics to let players chase awesome rolls on weapons they could love. While I got pretty lucky with rapid hit kill clip spare rations, I personally had more fun chasing my Kennel Orchid or Austringer. Yeah, that actually would have been sweet. The fact that we had to go into Reckoning to get the armor for Gambit Prime threw a lot of people off and actually resulted in a lot of people never going and getting the armor sets. Now, unpause, back to Chalice. The Chalice isn't perfect. Being held hostage by the rune you want to drop from a strike or crucible to go make the weapon or armor piece you're covering is pretty frustrating. But having more ways in the game to pursue loot in a deterministic fashion while preserving the hunt for a great roll is something that we hope to explore. Yeah, I guess sometimes it was, or at least in the beginning, it was frustrating if you didn't have the right rune. But I don't know, it just fueled me to do more. There's something to say about the Chalice. Before it got nerfed here recently, I would literally burn through my runes and then sit there and farm through activities to get more runes. Because even though a weapon may come out and be a god roll or a good roll, there's always something on it you're like, I want to try this. I want to see what this weapon would feel like with this. Now, things left unsaid while looking back. There's a lot of awesome stuff we didn't spend time talking about. Tribute Hall, Lumina, that cool Drifter cinematic with the Taken Captain, lore books, Vanguard Drifter choice, etc. Full disclosure, I'm always going to focus on opportunities for improvement rather than celebration. We're in the midst of solstice of moments of triumph, so the learnings for those are still bubbling up. Looking ahead to looking ahead. The rest of the Director's Cut updates are going to focus on Shadowkeep and the changes we're making this year. Here's some of the topics that we will be including. Supers and PvP in Destiny 2. Armor stats, mods, and trade-offs. Powerful sources, prime Ingrams, and the world. Damage numbers, damage stacking rules, and more. I know there's a lot to read because it was a lot to write. I appreciate you taking the time to make it this far. Like all things with Destiny, it's a journey. The next two parts of this journey will look at the RPG and combat game. See you soon, Luke Smith. Okay guys, that is Luke's write-up, part 1. Luke, thank you for giving us some insights into what happens on the development side of things, as well as what's going through your mind internally. I really like this, guys. When a developer can get together and do a write-up like this, especially one so clear and personal as this one, it's really nice. And something I didn't think about, because when I think of like an action RPG, I think those two things are married up. And Luke pointed out how Destiny has to straddle both of those things, which is actually true for a lot of other action RPGs. That combination of genres we tend to put together because it seems to just kind of like flow out of our mouths, like action RPG game. But it is two things that are in constant fights with each other. It's a constant tango. So it's really insightful to actually read that from a developer's perspective. Guys, those are our thoughts from pretty much our lead guy, our lead developer from Bungie. Luke is pretty much the guy that's the captain of the ship. I think he'll be putting out part 2 next week. We'll be going over part 2. He's going to be talking about supers and PvP. I'm sure this is going to talk about super resistance and toning that down, as well as PvP as a whole. Damage stacking rules is another one that stood out. The way buffs stacks as well as debuffs and what doesn't stack with each other. I'm sure there's going to be some reworks in that way. But it seems as if power attainment is going to be a main focus. PvP will be another main focus. Armor 2.0 is also going to be a big focus, and considering we're going to have the live stream tomorrow, which is actually going to show us Armor 2.0, we'll get an even better idea of what mods and stuff are going to look like, which again, that's stepping off more into the RPG sector. So more of that tango, man. So guys, we'll be covering that as soon as possible. Today was a long video. Thank you all for hanging out with us. And again, thank you Bungie as well as Luke Smith for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.